All right. I call this workshop to order. We are here for the workshop of January 25th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Val, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry? Here. Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Mayor Villa?
Thank you very much. And we are here today to discuss the LPGA discussion. Is my microphone on? Yeah? Okay. To discuss the LPGA possible four-laning discussion that we've talked about before, and Commissioner Johnson has stayed on top of it as our TPO representative to ask us to bring this back up so we can all discuss it again. And I understand that we have a representative from Newkirk Engineering here to speak with us today, but before I call him up, Mr. Forte, do you want to add anything, or should we go ahead and just bring him up?
Not really. I think this happened, Mayor, at a meeting that you were not present for.
He wasn't here.
And so the issue of the LPGA widening came up, and Commissioner Johnson said he knew a rather talented, experienced, and knowledgeable engineer that deals with the DOT that might be able to shed some light on this, and decided to invite him to a meeting. And I guess it'll be more of a question and answer period, I think, than anything. You know, we'll start out with an introduction and then go into some questions, and as specific as you want it to be, and we'll see what spills out at the end.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Forte. So at this time, if you would like to come forward and state your name and who you work for the record.
So good evening, everybody. I'm Tyler Malmberg. I'm a vice president at Newkirk Engineering. I'm running our transportation design office. So prior to joining Newkirk, which I've been here for 5 years now, I spent 9 years working at FDOT over in DeLand, and I had various positions there. I was in maintenance, design, and construction, so I have a pretty good exposure to the machine, if you will. And I've heard a lot about this project for like 15 years now, at least, getting batted around, and I'm curious to see where you guys are today.
Yeah, so you know, we've had talks over the last couple of years here and there, this commission, and there's been certain questions. So what we're here to discuss today is four-laning LPGA from Nova Road to US 1, and we know that there is a lot of obstacles or hoops to jump through, especially because of the canal and having to cover that canal most likely. But I know that there could be options put together by the engineer. Commissioner Johnson has been bringing this up actually almost every meeting since we've last talked. Yeah, since we've last talked about it, and I think we'll have some questions from the commission, but I don't know if you are up to speed with actually looking at this project already and maybe looking at potential options. I do know that one of the concerns of this commission is the use of eminent domain, but when we speak about eminent domain in the bad sense of somebody doesn't want to actually participate in that. So along that stretch, is it, well, let me just let you start off. Tell us what you know about the project, and we'll take it from there.
So I don't have a recent review of the project, but obviously I've driven the corridor quite a few times. I have a lot of ideas that have popped around in my head. I see that there's a number of challenges that you're going to have to go through in the process, and right now you guys are still kind of in a very preliminary planning stage. And as you go through the process of developing any project, there is a critical first step of a feasibility study or a planning study, or if it's a DOT project, it's a project development and engineering report. And effectively, that's what you guys need to get started. You don't have to have the answer of what is our finished product going to be when that started, but you have to know this is an idea we'd like to evaluate. Here's another one. What do we do if we get no right away? What are our options? What do we do if we take 8 feet or 10 feet from one side or the other as an easement to put in our pedestrian features or utilities? There's a lot of other options that can be explored, but whenever you have this length of a project, you have to clear a lot of different elements of the property. So you have to go through all the archaeological clearance, and you have to check and see if there could be potentially any historic sites. or other impacted properties. You have to look for, could there be an old gas station where there's contamination that needs to be remediated? So all of that's something that gets flushed during that process. So kind of what I think is the first step is to get a united idea of what are the limits, what's the overall scope that we'd want to have, and try to get the TPO to be a participant in that process and take advantage of the organization.
Move your microphone.
Kind of opened up.
Penny, Penny.
Since you've kind of opened up to a general base of very preliminary, like you said, would this be the responsibility of the city of Holly Hill or the county of Volusia since it's their road? So all the feasibility studies, all the things that we know we go through, very preliminary, would that be a job of or a task of city of Holly Hill or the county of Volusia?
It could be either. The short answer is that we have projects that get progressed through the TPO that are county road projects, but that a municipality felt very strongly about and put forth funding to try to get that first step engaged. Should it be the city's responsibility in those situations? That's really a question that, you know, not an area that I really want to delve into.
Okay.
It's got,
More of a
some
political-
implications on
Yeah.
both sides. But the reality is you can twist on the arm of the county as far as you can twist their arm, but they have a lot of budget limitations. I think when I look at this, there's an obvious thing that you guys have with the canal that's actually an advantage. You have floodplain areas that the canal drains. You have an opportunity with improving the canal to reduce those floodplain areas, to reduce your need for flood insurance in some areas, and to generate some benefits for the community outside of just the transportation improvements. And so to get funding for the project from multiple sources is going to make it more affordable because you have a huge expense if you have to put a box culvert in for that canal. And if you can get a benefit of reduced flood rates and other things, it starts to become something where there are some programs from the state that can be captured for money, but you have to have the study in place. So that's one area that I see a benefit. Number two is there's a lot of connectivity challenges because of that canal, and you can open yourself up to some redevelopment opportunities in some of the areas that are there. In other areas, it may not be a benefit to have that canal removed and the connection established. And so that's also one of the things that can get flushed with a planning level study. But my thought driving through it is it looks like you have about 100 feet of right-of-way. And with 100 feet of right-of-way, you can typically fit a 4 or 5 lane road. You're not going to get a large median. You're not going to get a lot of border features and benefits. It's going to be a slightly substandard to what would be a present day goal of right-of-way. Typically, we would shoot for about a 120-foot minimum. But we're able to fit everything that would need to be fit in the space that's there without taking property, assuming that there's a way to get the underground components to fit. And you have a big box culvert, you've got a lot of utilities. And then drainage pretty much goes to the canal now, so it depends on what the implications of the future drainage are. When you widen, there's going to have to be ponds. That's where your acquisition would come in.
Do you know, let me stop you right there. Do you know if there are state availability for money for this canal project? Not even speaking about the 4-laning, I know that's a part of it, but being that this canal runs off of the Nova Canal, which is one of 3 places where it can go into the river, over 12 miles, 5 different cities, and everything comes down the heart of us. You know, the county has placed a burden into the heart of our city and now placed this where I don't think there's a debate in this commission of whether the 4-lane is needed or it's not. I think we all believe it would be very useful to our city and beneficial, but I think that the burden is placed upon us to where now we have this canal, which is very expensive to go ahead and cover up, so that way we can actually use this road. So getting back to the question is are you aware of any funding, how we could get more players to the table to be able to fund that is that kind of what you're talking about with the floodplains by reducing that and
I
using
think
some of those?
that There are some opportunities, but it's where you have to look at the grant programs that are available and then what's actually asked of them. And so I know that there are some programs available that money could be pulled. DOT had a number of projects where they put in box culverts because they had outfall to them. So in this case, Nova Canal is maintained largely by DOT, right? And then it outfalls into this canal. Who maintains this canal right now?
The county.
So the county has a maintenance expense on it. They have an incentive to try to get it fixed. DOT relies on this as part of their drainage network. This is one of those times where it's about getting all the agencies to cooperate. There's not necessarily a single entity that's going to fund it, but a joint funding agreement is something that happens a lot for these types of facilities.
So, we're a small city, small staff. Who would be the perfect person to coordinate all these agencies? Would an engineering firm like yourself coordinate all those agencies? Because I don't see anyone that has that skill set here on staff right now. That seems like that's a full-time special job.
I think that is where you bring in an engineering group to do a feasibility analysis on it and to talk to each of the entities and to get an understanding of, I've dealt with some projects like this where we got a lot of traction. I've dealt with some projects where we got zero traction in bringing agencies together. And if you can't get the cooperative traction, then going through the TPO is also going to be difficult because every agency gets a vote. So if you can't get the agencies to work together to do it prior to getting at a TPO level, you're probably not going to see a lot of traction with the project separately. And that's the point that you have to start applying more political pressure through your county commission and through your representatives at a state level to try to get attention on the project getting funded.
So knowing nothing about engineering, but knowing what I've seen happen on LPGA to the west of us, we all saw the 4 lanes over the last 10 years evolve out that way. It appears that there's not only just the road, the hardscape, but there's dry retention, and when I look out there, it looks like in many spots, there's 150 to 170 feet between the dry retention and the property line and where the pavement stops. So in my mind, that's where the challenge is that maybe you could squeeze four roads in there, 4 lanes in there, but when the dry retention problem issue is, where does all that fit?
And that's here, you'll probably have wet detention, just because your water table is a lot higher here than what we've got a little bit further west there. But you will likely have to have ponds of some kind. I mean, the typical rule that we follow with St. John's is what's there today, they will exempt and allow to be carried forward in terms of surface area of the road and other impervious solid pavement type surfaces. So everything new, we have to meet the current drainage criteria for. So all the old stuff is dumping into the canal. We can
Right.
basically take half the road, dump it into the canal in the future. The other half of the road, you've got to have some type of a flood attenuation pond, and it's got to retain enough water to provide some level of pollution abatement. And typically it's a couple of inches of runoff over all of your impervious surfaces.
I mean, that's,
There's a few rules.
well, looking at it, that's my challenge, is that if I
Where
take,
does that pond
where does that pond go? Because now we've covered up the canal to get the asphalt there. And then we're going right from the property line, from the residential's on one side, on the south side, to the commercial property line on the right side. I don't believe there's any way to put 4 lanes in there with the required dry retention, wet retention, and all that without displacing some existing businesses or some residential component that's there.
I could
Would that
see
be fair?
very likely, yeah. And one of the things that you'll often see in these types of developed corridors that get widened is the ponds get placed, and I'm curious if this is what you've seen on LPGA, actually, they'll get placed 150, 200 feet offset from the right-of-way line, so that we can leave parcels that can be used for business or resident, whatever the use along the road is. So where we have a developed out area, we can take an easement or a right-of-way taking along the edge of a property and run pipes into the pond and put a pond behind. So we can try to find the least damaging place to stick drainage infrastructure, but you're right, there is going to be a need for that space. And that's the one thing that you do have a lot of flexibility with as an engineer where you place that, but
So is there, without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a complete feasibility study, is there a business, maybe like yourself, that can do a 30,000-foot level overview of this thing and go, listen, guys, in my professional opinion, this is a $25 million project. You're going to need to acquire 2.5 acres of property to accommodate this stormwater, and without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, because I think we all would love, in a perfect world, for there to be 4 lanes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We don't know what it's going to cost,
Perfect world.
when it's going to happen, or what's the first step, and we keep talking about it. And if we agreed today that we will fund this ourselves, we're not counting on DOT or the county or anyone else, we'll never have enough money to do it. But if we don't start now, it's more, and if DOT funded this thing, it's not going to happen until 30 years from now, if it ever happens, because they're not funding things that are currently in design. So in your professional opinion, what's the first step? Where I want someone to say, yes, this is possible, but you'll be long dead before it ever happens, or no, it's not possible. And maybe it's the wrong question for an engineer, because you can design anything, it's just, is it economically feasible?
so this is probably a better question for developers, but, because we don't really necessarily have this process, but developers do have this process, and I've encountered it with some of our bigger national chains like 7-Eleven and McDonald's and Wendy's and Starbucks and all these folks. They have a purchasing plan that they go through for any property that they consider. So step one is they have engineering firms they work with, and they do a pre-contract due diligence. They hire the engineering firm, say you have a $2,000 budget, tell us what the zoning is, tell us what our setbacks are, tell us what easements are there, just do the very minimum level of research to see if this is even a property worth us spending more money looking at. And they narrow it down to a few properties, they go make some offers, you know, in their order of favor, and if they get a contract, it's contingent on a 180 or 270 day due diligence period where they go and permit the project before they close. And so that pre-due diligence is just to save them the heartache of that whole permitting process period. And that's what you're kind of asking, is there something that we can do that gets us in to even kind of start that of what is the scope that we need to have in the feasibility study? So certainly that's something that
If I
can
can.
be done. I don't know how common that is. You know, to answer the question, there's a lot of engineering firms, us included, that would love to, you know, be able to take the first stab at something and try to get the 30,000-foot plan set. Usually through the process of a feasibility study, we do that, and then we have a meeting, and we concur, and we drill down to the next layer. So it's just basically the first part of it.
Commissioner Danio, you had.
I had a question. Well, part of it was what Commissioner Penny said about the time. Like, tomorrow we started this. Would you be like grandfather before this was even a possibility? And had you ever thought about other options than 4-laning LPGA as a possibility?
So one of the things that I don't live in Holly Hill, I live in DeLand, so my exposure to the road is when I'm here and when I'm coming and going from the area. And so I'm probably not seeing a lot of evening and weekend traffic patterns, but my experience has been that the through traffic is probably able to be accommodated on a 2-lane road. You have some turning movements, you have a lot of right turning movements that seem to create a friction in the road. That what's really underserved is everything else. You know, it's a very narrow set of pavement. You don't really have a shoulder for a bicyclist. The sidewalk is only on one side. It's in rough shape. There's some areas where the canal is eroding towards the road. The guardrail, as a result, is probably, you know, getting weakened. But, you know, so all of those things lead to what I see is even a 2-lane enhancement project, bringing in bike lanes, curb and gutter, some opportunities for better pedestrian enhancement, and to put the drainage underground would be substantial in the improvement and throughput of traffic. A 4-lane project is going to substantially improve your accommodation for events, for evacuations, for future development. So talk a little bit about something that I've seen. I'm going to pick on City of Port Orange here because they do some things really well. They get together behind the scenes and talk about where is it that we see development potential and redevelopment potential, and how can we remove some of the hurdles to that. And one of the big hurdles is often transportation capacity on our roads. So if a developer comes in, and anecdotally, I'm working on 2 new alignment projects that are both funded by developers coming in and paying impact fee credits. So if a developer comes in and wants to build something and they have to put $2 million into the transportation network, well, that goes into their project cost, spreadsheet, and they don't have any emotion about it, but it's a cost. So if that's something that you're able to get somebody else to pay for, whether it's through a LAP program or joint participation agreement type program funding, or whether it's that you can twist the county's arm substantially enough to get this onto their work program and get it funded through their funding resources, then that's something that you guys can advertise as, hey, we have improved your throughput here. You can get from the interstate to here in this time. That's a reduction of X minutes. All of those types of things are what the major chains are looking at. And you start bringing in some redevelopment and you start improving your tax base, getting opportunities for those developments to push some of these other improvements as well. That's part of the interactivity of it that you have to be looking at.
One of the ideas that was thrown out by one of our senior veteran staff members was possibility of going 2 lanes in one direction.
And I think that it's something that gets looked at on a lot of projects. I don't know what the traffic split here is. There are a lot of communities that you have an AM or PM peak surge in one direction on roads, and then you have a distribution for the other direction of movement over a longer period of time, so you don't have the need for the lanes. I think typically what DOT has found, there were a lot of 4-lane facilities that they reduced down to 3 lanes and used that lane as a turn lane so that they could get left turning vehicles out of the way of the through movement. They'd add right turn lanes or at least tapers to get the right turning vehicles out of the through movement. They actually picked up capacity over
I'm talking about using the 2 lanes that are there.
and just making it one way.
Right.
If you make it one way, you typically need to have another road that you pair it with.
Kind of like they did with Seabreeze Bridge, where you go
Yeah.
over one side, you come back with something else.
Yeah, you've got Seabreeze and Oak Ridge are your one-way pair there. Downtown Eustis, State Road 19 is a one-way pair. We had in Cocoa, one-way pairs are getting removed a lot now. I'll be honest, they create a lot of challenges for your businesses. So, this isn't really a heavy business corridor, so this may not be a bad place to look at it, but a lot of the downtown areas that have them, they're removing them in favor of a 2-way street for access.
And I could see that.
And I'm not a planner, so that's not something that I have expertise in. I'm just saying that as an anecdote, that I'm not seeing that as a common thing. In this case, getting 2 lanes in the same direction does give you opportunity to bleed the 2 lanes that are coming east. It's just how do you get folks back west?
And I think that was, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
If I could, what about, I know at one point there was discussion, because I was representative on TPO for quite many years. And I know that there was some discussions about 3-laning and having that. I know you guys don't like to refer to the suicide lane anymore, but I don't know what else to call it. I know that there was some discussion at one time about some of that quite a while back. What does that, would that accomplish something at
does.
least?
It does accomplish something. One of the things that, so take a traffic signal, just any red light that you run into, no left turn movements, just through movements. You're going to have a phase for a north-south movement and a phase for an east-west movement. That means that at most you've got 50% capacity if they're equal movements. And then you've got some yellow time that's lost, some red time that's lost, some startup time. So typically a signal on a main line with 2 major roads, you're looking at less than a 30% green ratio, or around a 30 to 32% green ratio for the through lane movements, because you have left turn lanes and everything else. So if we can take a through lane and separate the left turn movements out of it, then every time that there's somebody stopped, that's losing capacity of that lane. So if that is happening 20, 30, 40% of the
That
time,
does happen a lot.
we can add 20, 30, 40% capacity of the through movement to the road just by creating those left turn lanes.
Yeah, that happens all hours of the day.
And that's
I
what
mean,
I've observed out there.
Yeah,
is-
of course, there's peak times, like you said, but
And that's, during that study, one of the things, a very pre-level study, I would say, get counts. Counts are pretty cheap. We have an engineer that goes out, drops tubes on the ground. They record for 7 days, get 24-hour turning movement counts at all the intersections. You know what the volume of the road is. You know what is getting accessed. You try to pick a period during the year that's not atypical, not the first week of school, not middle of summer.
normal traffic.
Yeah, we try to pick October is a good month, and April tends to be a good month for us here in Florida. So,
Well, I actually had a question beyond what I stated. I have not been a proponent, that's why I'm not on the TPO, representing us on TPO anymore, because I have not been a proponent of four laning, because I think it does pose too many problems. It poses, well, first of all, it's not our road, but we could encourage the county to maybe move a little, but it poses a huge block because of the culverting, of the canal. That's a huge expense. But on top of that, from the corner over here, all the way past Center Street, halfway up the block to Nova, there's either homes or businesses. You also have the property over here that would probably be brownfield, would need brownfielding, I'm sure, because of just what it is and what it has been. But the major thing for me is the eminent domain. You're not going to have all those businesses or homes agree to sell and happily sell to whatever government entity. And I just don't see that as a serious emerging need to take people's homes or businesses. And that's where I still stand on it. But I wanted to get your opinion of the three-laning, because I do believe, like everybody else up here, I would love if it was four-laned and our homes were well away from the road and everything was set up perfectly. Unfortunately, we don't live in perfect worlds. So a three-laning, I wouldn't have a problem getting back into discussion with the county over that. But I just want to tell you, I appreciate your time coming out here today. But I'm still of the same mindset. I just can't approve what we're looking at.
Well, and we're not necessarily looking at either, we're just in the
Okay.
ideas.
Well, the idea of what I just discussed, I can't
So you're against
approve
the
on
idea
those
of
things.
four lane, okay. Vice Mayor, you had something?
Yes, I know you're not a planner, but let's put your planner hat back on, because that's kind of what we've been trying to do up here, and none of us are certified planners. But
By any means.
the thought was that all the growth is happening to the west of us. And then, so when people come east, whether they're going to the beach, or they're going to Nova Road, or they're coming to downtown US 1, is that they're getting squeezed at Nova. And so the thought was, we, I believe as a body, are not so concerned about getting people out of our city. We were more concerned, and that's to Commissioner Daniel's point and Mr. Forte's option of two-laning east, is that we don't want our US 1 downtown businesses to go out of business because they get, everyone
Yeah.
turns on Nova.
Right.
So the thought was, get them in, and we really don't care how they get out, because there's 15 other roads to get out, and there's not that much traffic coming in on that 1 mile stretch of US 1. But the thought was, get them in and make them stay here for a while. Seriously, that was
disperse
it,
through our city.
get them in and make them turn left and right on US 1, and then maybe they'll stop and buy some furniture at someplace, or buy some tires, or buy a pizza, or buy insurance, or whatever, you know?
Right.
They will visit our downtown, because US 1 is our main street, basically. So that was the thought, I believe, when Mr. Ford came up with the idea. My challenge is that, and Mr. Forte will have to help me with this, is that this thing's been studied and studied and studied. We have studies on the shelf that are dusty. And as I understand, the last study, that feasibility study that was done, was 3-laning. And so I'm not in favor of spending $100,000 on a feasibility study to reinvent the wheel, when all we have to do is take that dusty one off and go, okay, let's take that dusty one and see what it takes to make it a reality. So I don't know where we are with all these things, because we've been talking about this for
Well, and
100 years.
that's part of the problem, is that we don't have that 4-lane study from
Look
back
for
when.
that, and that goes back probably to the 90s, when that 4-laning was done, maybe even earlier than that. And the last time we talked about this a couple of years ago, we searched our internal documents for it, and we contacted the TPO, and we cannot find a 4-lane feasibility study. The only thing I have current is the 3-laning that was back in like 2014, somewhere around there.
Because as I understand it, before any of us were here, there was a 4-lane study, and it was on the calendar, and it was waiting for funding, but the
Right,
commission pulled it because they thought it would never happen.
right.
And that's just vaporized, right? That's gone. We can't find it.
That's the problem, is we can't find that, so it
I don't even-
existed because it was on the TPO's, long-term, and then that commission in the 90s removed it, because they didn't want that in there. And to be fair, at that time, LPGA wasn't what LPGA is now, and,
Who would have thought that there's
Right.
20,000 new houses going
Right.
up there?
And I guess, I think the reason why I keep liking to talk about this is because I look at a lot of those decisions that were made 30, 40, 50 years ago, all throughout this city's history, and I think that Holly Hill a lot of times has been, I don't want to say backward thinking, but not forward thinking, to where we're thinking 30, 40 years down the line, and I think that that's what's created a lot of the current problems we have and how we're so boxed in. And so that's just my greatest fear as an elected official. I think that we're all up here to look forward, and I know that we all try to do that. So as I look forward, this is one of the biggest problems I see getting people into, like you said, our main street, which is our US 1, and making sure that is where the majority of our service-based businesses are. And if we don't have a strong economy along that stretch, anywhere in our CRA, really, 1,600 properties, then I think that the city for the future is in a lot of trouble moving forward. But, and I hear what you're saying, and one of the questions I have from Commissioner Curry is 3-laning. Would it be possible, if we didn't go all 4 lanes, would it be possible if we did 3 lanes but had 2 lanes coming into our city, 1 lane going out, and maybe in some certain areas where there is more room, maybe even 4 lanes, but that 4th lane would be a left turning lane somewhere? Is that an engineering thing, or is that just a crazy idea?
It does happen sometimes, but this is where I would say you would want to talk to the county first. I'm sure all of you have worked with John and Tad, as, they've been at the county for a while now. And so Tad Casebier's very level-headed, very reasonable, very calm, and he's not necessarily trying to be 40 years into the future with engineering, which some city engineers try to do that. A lot of county engineers try to do that these days. I really like that Tad is very grounded in that regard. John is one of the most experienced traffic management engineers that I've encountered in my career. He's phenomenally intelligent, and he's also, not always in agreement with Tad on what the best answer to a problem is. So this is something where both of them in the room have to be on board for that to be something that you would even want to spend a dime pushing, because if not, if John is the opposition.
I think where we're at right now, though, is as a commission, so the county the county has a lot of transportation issues. The county has a lot of big issues that they have to pay attention to, and they're not paying attention to this issue. Even though I believe this is a more regional issue for Daytona and even Ormond Beach, because as the vice mayor said, right now the psyche, a human psyche coming down 4 lanes and it being wide and open, and then there's this canal and it all filters into here, human traits are to turn right and left, and they're going to skirt right around our city, which will then, when people are moving forward, we want them to come into our city and then disperse. So that's part of the thinking. So I think that the county, in order for the county to get behind this, I think that we have to kind of start moving the ball, being like, hey, Holly Hill really wants this. Holly Hill really wants the county to take a look at this. And I think at that point, then the engineers for the county manager, and politicians will then say, okay, are we going to take this up or not? And at the end of the day, they might not ever pick it up. We may ask them to, and they don't. But I think a lot of what Mr. Johnson wants to bring forward is us just saying that we like the idea, and that something needs to be done about it, and we need partners to pick this up and run with it, because we can't run with it ourselves. Yeah, Vice Mayor?
In a perfect world, I would like to hire someone in your capacity to tell me that, in your professional opinion, or an engineer's professional opinion, this is your best option, and this is your most realistic option. This is what we all want, is 4 lanes. What we need is something better than what we have. And I don't know if that person or that company exists, but I need someone in the perfect world I could pick them out on Google and hire them tomorrow and say, listen, what do we really need? And you have a lot of experience with dealing with the DOT and dealing with the county. I need someone to tell me, in their professional opinion, what can we get through? What can we get with these other funding? Because if we just draw the line in the sand and say 4 lanes or nothing, it's going to be nothing.
John, not to
Right.
interrupt you, but I think that's what the TPO is there for as well. Because their staff helps lead the cities through that process.
And-
That is a part of their responsibility.
And I agree, but I have to go back to what the mayor said, is that I think because of our size, we're a flea at the TPO. We get outvoted on everything. We don't have the ability to go forward. But if we get united as a commission and as a community, and we have someone help us to point us in the right direction, say, listen, guys, I know you want that 4 lane, but 2 lanes this way, 1 lane that way, or we'll just do 2 lanes coming in, and we'll do like they do in Disney World. And we'll build a bridge, and we'll have over and under traffic. You know, he could design anything we want. It's just, can we afford it? And and we'll never be able to afford it, but we have to come up with a solution that we can sell to other agencies to partner with us.
Right.
But none of us know we know what we want, but none of us know what we really need, and none of us know what we really think we can get. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but that's my frustration. I know what I want, but I don't believe I will ever get what I want, because we don't have enough money to make it happen. I'm not a good enough salesman to get the TPO and get the county and get DOT and get Congressman Waltz and get money from wherever we can to make this happen, because it's only 1 mile, and we're such a big county, and we don't have the political clout to make it happen.
And that's, I agree with probably 99% of that. And then just at the end, I disagree. I think that we can have political clout. I think if we go down that route of like, hey, we're a united front, and you're right, we don't really know what we need, we know what we want, but we really haven't ever had a concerted effort to go to any federal funds or state funds ever.
No, I agree.
And-
We can get the clout, but we got to know, I'm not going to cheer for something, and I hear Commissioner Curry's not going to cheer for the 4 lane unless we have someone tell us that it's feasible, and it's likely.
I agree. It's got to be feasible, And yes, it has to be able to be done. And
Because then if this commission gets together, we can then get citizen action groups together, we can get people out there, and we can go to the county, and we can go to the TPO meetings in numbers, and the squeaky wheel gets greased.
Right.
But we don't know, I don't know what to fight for right now. That's my frustration.
I
think-
totally hear that.
I agree with that.
You know, my 2 cents, listening to this and also, you know, thinking ahead, what are the challenges if you were to hire me, what are the challenges I'm going to bring back? That canal is all wetland. It's likely going to be deemed jurisdictional. It means that you're dealing either with Army Corps or FDEP, wetland impact permitting on top of everything that has to be met with Water Management District for that. So nobody wants to touch this canal because it's a headache. But most of the canal is really maintained. It's a really low-quality wetland. It's a headache, but it's not necessarily something that's even that expensive proportionally. It's just a pain in the butt, so nobody's wanting to take it on and be the person responsible.
And honestly, the county's responsible for it. They don't maintain it. They don't
Right.
have a budget to maintain it. But before you were alive, Mayor Johnson and I used to ride up and down Nova Road and count the turtles in the canal over there.
Well, and
Because-
DOT maintains a lot of these.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked the question.
Right.
Is because this may be one of the few that they somehow have not been handed the responsibility on. But the maintaining agency has a vested interest in getting this thing to be a lower maintenance item. The big picture that I see, you know, your concern about right-of-way takes, it's a very valid concern. It's something that, without doing a lot of preliminary engineering study on it, there's not a definitive answer on what would be needed. And so, is there something needed? Maybe. There are some underground options that you can use for stormwater. With a high water table, that becomes a challenge. So, you know, is it feasible here? I don't know. But I have a project that I'm working on in Apopka where it is feasible, where we're doing all of the stormwater is underground within the right-of-way, and it's a tight right-of-way like this. And it's a very complicated, and it's a pain in the butt. And I got the project because another engineer was not wanting the project, and it looked like a fun project for me. But it is a pain in the butt. And so that's the same thing here. Is the county doesn't want to take it on because you have the canal, you have the road, you have the residences, you have utilities that are in this right-of-way as well. All of these things bring together a bunch of different stakeholders, a bunch of permitting processes. There's a lot of risk. What does the project cost? Well, if this goes wrong, it costs a lot more money. So that's where you guys have probably run into roadblocks in the past. And, you know, in the effort of getting that political clout, it starts at the TPO, I think. And so that's where the unified voice is. We need something. We know we have a problem here. This problem has been kicked around for 40 years. It needed to be dealt with 30 years ago. It hasn't been dealt with. It's getting worse. The canal's getting in rough shape. The road's getting in rough shape. We're under accommodating our users. We know that we have more traffic coming than we can accommodate, and it's costing our city business. This is something that we want to stand behind. It's the only project that we have a strong priority on. Persistence.
You're recording this, right, Val? Yeah. We're going to take that, and get it in a letter, and give it to Mr. Johnson at the TPO meeting. Okay.
Well, and two, there's a lot of talk right now, to your point about political clout of LPGA. If you go anywhere in the county on any issue, in any of the debates, this election, all of the county people are going to be talking about what is the biggest infrastructure issue in Volusia County, and they're all going to first say
The
LPGA.
two-lane bridge on LPGA by
But they're
Waterloo.
meaning the two-lane bridge way out there, but all they say is LPGA Boulevard because of all the building that's happening and having them come east. Now, what they're not saying is LPGA between Nova and US 1, but the point is that has a lot of momentum. That has a lot of political clout right now. It's an issue that has to be dealt with. It's a bit of political football and been tossed around. It will get funded because it has to, 100% has to. They have no choice about that. It will work out
But
one way or
developers
another.
out there, they're going to pay their
Correct.
proportionate fair share.
Correct.
That's the problem.
But they have to have the state come to the table.
Right.
And I think that it's such a hot button issue that now is the time, if we're ever going to try to start talking about this, is now to start saying, hey, included in that LPGA is our little project here because it's important to the entire area. And I think you strike when the iron is hot. But let's say we wait 5 years and that's already funded and already done, and now we're coming and going LPGA again. And they're like, what? No, we
Yeah.
did that. And no, this is done and over with.
So, one thing I picked up on is that Mr. Johnson's been asking us to go back and say, hey, we want 4 lanes. I don't know that we need 4 lanes. I think we give Mr. Johnson direction to go back to the TPO and go, we need something.
Yeah.
We need
Now, that I
something.
could champion. I
We-
could
we
get
need
behind
assistance.
that without a problem.
Yeah.
Every time I bring it up,
Speak forward into the mic, Commissioner.
every time I bring it up at the TPO, the first thing they say is all of the city commission on board with it?
With what, though? That's the problem, we
Does
don't
all the
know.
city commission agree that that's what they want, or what they want to do? And I
Right,
want
but I think we don't know what we need.
Or what we
But
want.
I'm telling you right now, though, we don't go to the TPO anymore and say that's what we want. We have to go to the TPO and say we need something. We don't just want it, we need it.
Right, I agree, we need something, but right now, I don't know if that's 2 lanes, 3 lanes, 6 lanes, a subway.
Double decker.
I don't know what it is.
Monorail if you want to go to.
We need a change of what we have now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember a few years, not too many years ago, well, quite a few years ago, when LPGA was 11th Street.
Right.
I remember one night, some lady drove in a ditch at Williamson Boulevard, the business intersection of the world right now, and 11th Street. She drove in a hole in a ditch on Friday night, and they didn't even find her car till Monday morning because it was so desolate out there. Look, and that's.
Used to be a dirt road.
That was like 10 years ago.
That was so long. Now, look, we have to look in the future as well. We didn't have what we have now out in LPGA.
Right.
But we didn't have pickleball. Look at pickleball when it comes up phase 2 and all the tournaments coming in. The GPS is all going to point everybody to LPGA coming into Holly Hill. They're going to get to Nova Road, and they said, now where do we go? Where
we
do
don't-
go now? We
we
go
don't
down this
know it.
2-lane road to get there?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
We know
something's
we
got to
tell
be
them.
different about it, you know what I mean? It's got to have a change. We have a flight gymnastics up there we didn't used to have. That's got over 500 members at it now. It's so busy, sometimes the parking lot is completely full, and they didn't think they'd have half that much. It's taken off, the sports things. Now we got this rock climbing thing's going to come in. A lot of people are going to be coming in for
There's a
that.
baseball place coming to town too, isn't there?
Yeah, something, I heard.
It hasn't, it is not the point where we want it anymore. It's come to the point where
Right.
we really need it.
But I think that's
you know?
what I,
I know we don't have the money, we don't have the funding.
Right.
But we have to start somewhere.
right, but I think this
I
commission
begged
would get
the county
behind you.
engineer-
If
I
you-
begged the county engineer to widen Williamson Boulevard from Hand Avenue to Strickland Range Road, because all they want to do is bring in 3 dump truck loads of asphalt and go from Strickland Range Road down to LPGA. County engineer agreed to do it. He said, okay, we'll do it. So they're going to do that. Now they're going to 4-lane Hand Avenue all the way back to Nova Road as well. So you can talk to them, and you can get them on board to do the things. You just got to bring up and let them know what you need. But everybody has to be on board with it. They can't.
I think we're all on board with saying, we need
We need something.
We need a change.
We
need
need
to
to look at
change.
what our alternatives are.
We need a
Yeah.
better alternative.
Exactly, right
I'm looking
there.
at 3 alternatives in my head right now, and one of them is what you have today, just the no-build option. Anytime that we do a feasibility study, we compare it to what if we just leave it?
Right.
So we project traffic out and we show it just turns into a mess. Or a bigger mess, if you will. And then 3-lane option, try to keep the canal as an above-ground feature, maybe do some hardening on one side of it with a retaining wall or something. Get room to where we can get a 3rd lane in, improve the corridor, minimal drainage improvements, avoid, eminent domain being a necessary component of the project. 4-lane. I don't know of many 4-lane projects that have been regretted after the fact, is one thing that I'll throw out there. It's painful when you're disrupting a business, but, the rule in the state of Florida, I would really love to own property that DOT's buying because I'm going to get over market value for it. And so, same thing, all the agencies have to follow the same eminent domain rules, that it's appraised by multiple appraisers. You're going to be paying probably 20 to 100% above market value to the owner. If it's a business, they're going to get paid relocation costs if they have to relocate. Right-of-way is insanely expensive for agencies. It ultimately doesn't end up being as negative of an experience for most owners as they expect it to be when it starts. So that's, one thing as you, I'm certain, have experience with this as well, and your opinion's probably not based on nothing, but, from being on the agency side, that's something that we saw a lot, was a lot of people saw.
Oh, I understand it's very beneficial financially. Problem is, there's a pretty decent little size area there of some duplexes just west of Center. I don't think too many of those people in there would be able to go out and afford those new apartments that are going up out at LPGA.
And that's
So we could give them all the money we want to, but then again, they wouldn't be getting any, they're renting. So that's where the big problem comes in.
And that is one of the challenges, and that's something that.
So that's why, as long as I'm
but
on the
that's part of the planning
commission,
study,
I
that-
cannot support that.
Tyler, excuse me, the three options in your head right now, are they all in the same time range, or is it pretty much saying, well, you could definitely get this done within a 5-year versus the other one might take 30 years, or?
What I would suggest is that you go to the TPO and say, we've talked about these two options endlessly. The 4-laning has a lot of benefits that we would like to capture if we could in terms of future growth capacity and, future-proofing this corridor. We're touching it. We don't want to touch it again in 10 years. So if we're going to need to touch it again in 10 years, we'd rather, bite the bullet, do the 4-lane today. But if we don't need to, then the 3-lane might be adequate. We need help making that decision. There's a lot of other parties that are involved. We think that the TPO is the right place for this to start, given that this is something that we really need for our community. And I think everybody agrees that there is something that needs to be done there. It's just a question of what is the shape of that. And that could be, I don't think that the TPO would have objection to, we need information on what the implications are so that we can make decisions on whether we support the projects moving forward from that point. We support a project, we just don't know which one yet.
Right.
And I think that that's what I would recommend, is that while there's that indecision or, a split opinion, or however I term that, amongst the members of the commission, the TPO isn't going to move forward, but you guys are united that something needs to happen, that this section of the facility is where it needs to happen. It's going to involve the canal, the road, the sidewalk, the whole right-of-way there. We just don't know what that looks like. We're looking at trying to minimize the impacts to our community while capturing the improvements that we needed 20 years ago. That's a message the TPO can go, okay, here's how we can put a study in a year, 2 years. You can get that ball rolling and maybe use their money. That's your best option.
great.
So you're saying they could potentially pay for the study if they get behind it as
Yes.
well? Okay.
And there is a project that, so I'm on the property owner side on a project in DeLeon Springs, so Volusia County, because it's not a city. DOT Access Management Project. A study was prepared by the TPO. It was not a even complete finding with concept plans. It was put into a scope. It's being designed to be built right now. And so it's something that was put in at a request because there were a lot of injury and fatal crashes in the stretch. So it's largely an access management safety project. Situation that you have here, I don't know that you would be able to make the claim to get it in as a safety project. This is going to be a capacity enhancement, capital improvement type of project that they're going to be looking at. You're competing with other municipalities, and it is a county road, and all of that cooperation has to happen. But I mean, I am hearing a unified voice that we have a problem. We'd like to address it if there's a way that we can. It's just a question of what is the level that actually needs to happen.
Right. Vice Mayor?
And within $50,000, what does a feasibility study, we're going to have to sell the TPO. So in my opinion, it makes sense if this commission agrees we need change. I would be in favor, if it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, for this commission to hire and retain a feasibility study of do nothing, 3 lanes, 4 lanes. Then we have data to take to the TPO and then say, this is what we want. Because if we have to go to the TPO to get them to agree to a feasibility study, they're going to say, we did that 40 years ago, and we did it 20 years ago, and nothing has changed. But if we go in there with data, if it's affordable for us to do it, do you have any idea what these
I
things
think
cost?
it won't be affordable. for
It
you to
won't-
do,
it won't be
is the-
affordable.
Is the short answer. The things that I was thinking about that I would analyze if I were laying it out, step one is I'm going to look at the capacity of the canal. I'm going to look and see, are there any studies where they've done a hydraulic modeling on the canal? It's absolutely going to be essential for the project to move forward to do a preliminary hydraulic model for how that's draining, what the different stages are as you move westward towards the Nova Canal. So step two is you've got to have all the traffic counts that are up to date. So in 20 years, we've had a lot of growth. I mean, not just Holly Hill,
Right.
but the state of Florida is exploding right now, right? So our traffic has shifted substantially in Volusia County in the last 5 years, and it's something that everybody's aware of. So that's a big difference from what they did 20 years ago that, you know, Roy points out to him and says,
Right.
no, it is different. 20 years has passed, and nothing was done because at the time, they said 20 years down the road is when this needs to be done, and it might be different what we need to do. That was the discussion back then, right? I mean, nobody was there. Likely they won't remember it, but make an argument of, a valid argument of why it is that it didn't happen, and rooted in the fact that it didn't need to happen then, but it does need to happen now. And it's not our road. We don't want to have to put the money forward. And if we don't have to, we'd like to try to get this on your program. If you get told no, you can look at a pared down study to try to refine the answer, to try to bring costs down on the final, but all of the modeling that's necessary to do a full canal analysis like that, it's weeks of time for an engineer. So it gets very expensive very quickly, and it's something that I wouldn't personally do. If you were to hire us, I would be having Harry do it, because Harry's got 20 years of drainage experience on me. I mean,
So would it be prudent for us to take some of these ideas that we've gathered this evening, ask Mr. Forte to try and craft a letter, and it won't happen by tomorrow, Roy, but to put some of these issues forward, and then have the entire commission sign it, and have Roy take it to the next TPO meeting and say, this is what we want?
Yeah, I think today was very productive. I really appreciate your time
Yes,
in
thank you
this.
so much.
I think it was very productive because I
You
think that
really-
now we are all, we're actually way more on the same page than I think previous discussions. And I think you said it best, is that we know what we want, but maybe not what we need. And that study will tell us that, and those options. And you know, I'm open-minded to the potential of 3-lane with 2 lanes coming in, 1 lane going out, because that gets us to our goal of having more people be able to come into the heart of our city. So with that being said, Mr. Johnson, I think you see that we are on the same page here. And I do believe the next best step is to involve the TPO. So if there's not an objection from the commission, Mr. Forte, do you have anything to add before we move forward? Do you think a letter would be the appropriate step, or maybe a meeting between you and the TPO representatives?
No, I think one step even prior to, I think my next conversation should really be with John Cheney.
Who is John Cheney?
He's the traffic engineer for Volusia County.
Oh,
He's
okay.
been there for a lifetime. And I think John Cheney's wisdom would be very important. And I think John Cheney's support or lack of support will dictate the direction that TPO goes. So what I'm saying to you is, I believe, and you can correct me if you think differently, I believe John Cheney is the key to whether or not this is even going to be heard in front of the TPO.
Okay. Is there any objection of
No.
Joe reaching out?
So I'll reach out to John Cheney first and have hopefully an in-person meeting with him and throw all the thoughts and ideas that I've heard here and in the past at him. And, you know, if John turns around and says, you are never going to get it, I'd come back and tell you that, and I think I would believe him.
Yeah.
But if John says you've got opportunities, then I think we should explore them.
Mayor, if I may, I really don't believe 4-laning is ever going to happen unless you take those homes and businesses. So, like you suggested, I want to make sure that we let them know we're open to options. Like Mayor Villa said 2 lanes coming in, 1 lane going out. Both lanes coming in. Whatever the best option is for us, that's what we need to move on. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on all that. I do not support, I've said it, I don't know how many times, so I'm not even going to say it again. But I think everybody knows where I stand.
All right, so let's move forward with that. I appreciate you coming and presenting and answering all of our
Thanks so much.
questions.
You really helped out a
Yeah.
lot. Thank you.
Yeah, we
I
really,
hope I really did.
You did. You truly did. Thank you.
thank you so much. So, Joe, you have your direction, and then hopefully that can happen before the next meeting, and you can give us an update there as well, and then we can determine the steps that we may need to take with the TPO moving forward. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Is there anything further you want to add to this discussion, Joe?
Not for me, no.
Okay. Is there anything further from this commission before we end the workshop? All right, with that, this workshop is now over, and we will start the city commission meeting in a couple minutes. I think there's people